Hey everyone, it's JC here from Encore Design. Today I wanted to walk you through how I think about building a good ChatGPT app. We're gonna start with the framing that a good ChatGPT app aligns system capability with user intent, and then we're gonna dive deeper into three main steps or sections for a Notion ChatGPT app. Basically, every product has different capabilities. As we've seen, we have this ICE framework that we've been defining and thinking about. So that means that every ChatGPT or MCP app that we've analyzed so far falls in either the inspect or create or execute capability. So in this case, we need to define, according to this taxonomy, where our Notion ChatGPT app falls into, right? I think in this case, an interesting example because Notion can inspect information, can create content, and can execute changes. So technically, we could build a ChatGPT interface that does all three. But capability doesn't automatically tells us where to start. So just because something can create or execute doesn't mean that that's the right entry point for a first version at least. So instead of starting with the features, I prefer starting with intent. So in this case, for our version 1, we are stating that our capability is inspect, right? So create and execute can be secondary, or we can think about that later on, but not to mix different capabilities. We're going to start with inspect. So that's what we are defining as a first step. So in taking that into account, we now can start thinking about the user intent and the mode of work for the user, right? So we know that the product, our ChatGPT app, is going to solve for the inspection or the insight display of data. So in this case, that is what also intuitively we can think of when we think about Notion. It's apart from the creation, it's a place where you have a database of knowledge, right, about your company, your projects, your tasks, etc. So that's what we're defining as an entry point. Then if we zoom in a bit more into the modes of work, what we see is that when someone, the way we want to think about this is when someone opens Notion inside ChatGPT, what are we trying to do? Usually it's not create a database. More often it's more about what's going on, what have I missed, what should I focus on? Where are we stuck? These kind of questions that the user has, right? So I think for these modes of work, we want to be opinionated, right? So again, we are going to try to skim it down to the essential here, so we don't end up in a very convoluted, in a very confusing. So for me, our V1 for Notion ChatGPT app should focus on the explore, compare, and constrain modes of work. We can leave, create, commit, and defer for a later stage if needed. So for explore, if we look at some of the examples, so I tried to put on the user hat and think of what would be the user needing at this point, right? So I can think of different human ways of kind of edit it out. So I can think of human ways of reflecting this thinking, right? So what changed this week? What's at risk? Where are we stuck for the exploration? Where are my tasks? These kind of questions. And compare would be frame as something like which project is the most delayed. So I can see either a view 101 on the projects, or I can trust ChatGPT to basically fetch this information for me. Where are the overdue tasks? What's sleeping compared to the last sprint? So there are different questions that the user might think about when comparing options or trying to filter down the options shown or fetched by the app. And then constrain is where we really want to narrow down to one or a couple more opinionated set of data. So for example, think of show only marketing tasks or only tasks due this week. So with these three modes of work, I think a user can get all the benefit from a very basic version of a Notion ChatGPT app, right? So we have defined our capability. So we're going to focus on the inspect. So we have narrowed down that capability. Then we have our modes of work, and we are, again, filtering down to the essential modes. So my choice would be that we're going to start by building two very specific set of features. We're going to focus on, again, not create, not execute, no writing. We just ship the insight layer. So it's read-only, it's aware of the context, and it supports the decision. That's it. That translates for me into two simple wireframes that I can already do and that can guide most of the development of this ChatGPT app. If we double click on wireframe A, we can see that we want to have something like a chat and then the workspace overview widget, and then maybe some cards representing the projects, maybe some status tags, maybe some overdue badge. Again, these UI elements, they just support what we define in our modes of work questions, right? Like, what is the status? So we can think about status tags or overdue badges, things that support that status, that mode of work the user is in. So this is a quick wireframe. Let me walk you through it. Basically, the user, and this helps me define what the experience should be, and then get a better idea of how the LLM should interact with the UI widget, right? So again, this is a very different way of thinking about wireframing a product experience. So if we think about defining a web experience or an app experience, then it is quite different because we have two different actors at play that can be combined or should be combined to make a great UX. So in this case, we start with defining what the user is asking. So maybe the user is asking something like, what should I be paying attention to this week? And then our app steps in, and basically the LLM says, okay, here's a quick snapshot of your workspace. So you have 2 projects that are at risk, 5 tasks that are overdue, etc., etc. And then it goes on to present the breakdown, the visual element of this data. So below is a breakdown. Then we can define our widget. So in this case, we can have a very simple overview of what needs attention this week. And again, there are so many different ways that an MCP app could surface this kind of information. It could, I mean, they default this kind of information. But for now, we're going to go with a very simple overview with some context on what you're looking at, and then a very simple carousel. Again, there's so many different ways to do this. Okay, that part we cut out. So we don't want to get into editing or destructive controls or mutations. Something that is important is that we get the CTAs right. So when you're looking at an inspect mode, we often want to have a bridge to the rest of the product. There could be a CTA here signaling that you can continue exploring this if you need it in Notion, or the card itself, you can keep inspecting more by clicking on the card itself. But for now, we're focusing on, I just want to see what's going on. So then there's another part that I think it's important is to have a conversational hook. So something that the LLM is really useful for is to have that continued conversation or inviting the user to keep the conversation going. So in this case, I think it's important that we have an introduction. Then we have and context for the user, what you're looking at. Then the UI widget that solves one specific problem is, it doesn't need to be really complex on the UI, it just needs to be useful. And then conversational hook. What do you want to dig deeper into? Maybe it's reviewing the tasks that are blocked, and then it surfaces a different widget filtering down. So that's where you start getting into the different modes of work when you want to compare the set of data, or you want to constrain a bit more by looking at maybe just design or website related tasks. So this is where it starts to basically build up into a full, thorough product experience. So this is a quick overview on how I would think about building a very simple version of a Notion ChatGPT app. I hope it's useful, so you can see how I scope it out, how I basically try to be very opinionated at every step about what I'm building and why I'm building it. So for me, designing a good ChatGPT app or a good MCP app is not that much about how much it can do or all the features that it should have, but it should be about what it can do first to solve a user's problem. Well, I hope that was useful, and let me know if you'd like to see me diving deeper into redesigning a different app or any other content. Thank you.